Now, the quality of your fish is absolutely 50% water quality that we can test for you, and it's 50% food quality. Now, most fish food is processed crap in a can, but there's also very good fish foods. So the two that I am overly biased towards is Spectrum's probiotic. And the reason why I like Spectrum's probiotic is it is a cold extruded food. It's not pressure cooked or processed, and it has a probiotic bacteria in the food, which means when the fish poo, the bacteria in the poo eats the poo. So you'll find that the tank really does stay cleaner. So that's my number one food. And I also tend to mix that with Dainichi's color, because I find that 20% Dainichi color and the rest of it Spectrum's probiotic. And I would say I get the best results out of that. And I will also feed some frozen food as a bit of a treat. So a bit of a variety of foods with Spectrum's probiotic as the main food. And the next thing is, if they don't want to eat the pellets, you can sort of teach them to do it. So let's imagine that they're eating bloodworms or brine shrimp or something. If you just get a little bit of pellet and mix it in with the bloodworms or brine shrimp, so it all sort of smells the same, and then you need some of them to start eating it, then you can start reducing the amount of the bloodworm or the brine shrimp until eventually they just start eating the pellets. So basically all the fish in my shop pretty much eat the pellets, but I will come across people and they'll say, oh, my fish don't. So it's just that your fish have trained you, but you also can train your fish. It doesn't always work. Now, the other thing is, so what are we going to feed? And then the next thing is, how much do we feed? So fish like Anthias, they're very hard to please because they eat small amounts of food very regularly. So unless you're going to have an auto feeder dispersing very small amounts of food in, say, 4 times a day, then it's unlikely that this fella's ever going to get enough nutrients to survive long term. If we did have an auto feeder dispersing small amounts 4 times a day, there is a chance it'll be okay. The other thing too is that we have now got live cultures of various copepods, and they're actually a very good food source for these fish as well. So if you did start buying copepods on a regular basis, then eventually the copepods are going to populate the aquarium, and they're little microorganisms that zoom around, and they're actually a fairly good food source for a lot of your fish. So they help to clean up the environment, and they also help to feed your fish. So adding some live copepods, we sell them at Majestic Aquariums, and just go through a phase where you're buying copepods as a food source. You basically get what's almost like an empty bottle. There's lots of microorganisms in there. You throw it in here until you culture it up. And then when it's really well cultured, if all your lights are off and you turn a light on, a torch, then you'll see these little dots buzzing around in there. And they are great scavengers, and they're also great food source for your other fish. Now, for an aquarium like this, which at the moment has very, very low bioload, water changes are really not very important. I would suggest you could go for years in this aquarium, assuming the current stocking, and you will see very little disadvantage as far as not water changing is concerned. Now, that's all relative to the amount of fish you've got and how much you feed. So if you start getting a lot more fish and you start feeding a lot, then all of a sudden water changes become very important. Now, the things I'm looking for water changes. Number one is the nitrate level. I don't want to see my nitrate and phosphate start to accumulate, because water changes are an effective way of decreasing nitrate and phosphate. The other one is that when you do a gravel clean, depending on how dirty the sand is, that will be another indicator of when I'm going to do water changes. So I will do water changes to make sure that when I'm gravel cleaning, it isn't too dirty. And then I will also be concerned about what's called accumulants. So over time, there are various things that we call accumulants, which just means lots of things that we don't really know about, don't really understand, can't really test it. But over time, they do tend to build up, which over a long period of time can actually be an issue to the fish. Now, there are ICP tests available now, so it never hurts just to send off an ICP test, and that will give you an idea of a lot of the trace elements and various things that are a good indicator. Particularly one day when this is a thriving coral reef aquarium, doing a quarterly ICP test is a very good idea. It's like a snapshot of a lot of the trace elements and minor elements and so forth that we can't normally test. But the other thing we can do is just use polyfilter every now and then, because the polyfilter will adsorb and absorb anything impure out of the water, but it won't remove any of the good stuff. It won't remove your trace elements, vitamins, or anything we actually want in the water. So just running some polyfilter in the tank is going to attend to the cumulants. Then using probiotics is a massive impact on the amount of waste that grows in the sand. So in regards to water changes, the long and short of it is if this tank ends up with lots and lots of fish in it, water changes are going to become very important. While there's not a lot of fish in it, water changes are not very important. Now, as far as the Ford versus Holden or seawater versus synthetic water is, you can do it both ways. Some people swear by natural seawater. They swear that they get better results, and that's okay. Other people swear by synthetic water. Now, the advantage of synthetic water is that you can use your RO, which you got to make sure you replace the membranes like every year or two. And then you can have a top-up system like this that you can use for mixing up your salt. And then if you use a good quality salt, something like Royal Nature, then you pump that into your sump. Then we know what you're putting in the tank. We know that you're putting pure water and whatever the salt addition is. So therefore, we tend to get less silicates. Now, silicates are not really a problem, and they are a food source to your corals. But if your silicates are going unchecked, you get lots of this light brown algae. And this light brown algae are diatom algae, which is basically growing as a result of silicates. Also, don't think that you're going to go and clean your tank and get rid of them, because they're unicellular. So if you go and clean your tank, the diatoms just float around and then they just stick back on again. So if you actually want to do anything about diatoms, you need to use something like polyfilter, and then you actually wipe it, and then you pull the diatoms out on the polyfilter, and then you let that dry, and then that will kill the diatoms. Most people don't do that. Most people just get a magnet cleaner or something, and they just go, Bob's your uncle, and they make it look clean, but those things do just float around and stick back on again. So if you want to remove them, you've got to physically remove them. And the gravel cleaner is quite good for just removing a little bit of them that way. But controlling silicates is really your best bet. So if you JBL do silicate tests, otherwise a ICP test will give you a silicate reading. But if you get your silicate down and you get your calcium, KH, pH up, then we can start to grow nice coralline algae. Nitrate and phosphate is the enemy of coralline algae, whereas nice high pH, KH and magnesium is what we're looking for.